This is the Horse Radio Network.
This is episode 552 of Horse Tip Daily. A different horse tip, a different equine topic, a different equestrian expert every day. Horse Tip Daily brings the world of equine knowledge to you one day at a time. Today's tip is brought to you by ECOGOLD, makers of innovative saddle pads and protective boots for your horse. Hi, Coach Jen here, and thanks for tuning in to Horse Tip Daily. Today's tip is from thehorse.com's weekly horse health report on the Horses in the Morning Show, episode 273. Today, hyperkalemic periodic paralysis. Just the facts, ma'am. But first, a word about today's sponsor, ECOGOLD. ECOGOLD is the leader in high-tech problem-solving saddle pads and horse boots. And how do they do it? Science. ECOGOLD uses different technologies and materials to solve different issues. Innovation for ECOGOLD means dumping the old-fashioned one-size-fits-all mentality. They've developed 5 different lines of saddle pads to address the most important issues for our equine athletes: friction, stability, fit, security, and comfort. And ECOGOLD knows your equipment needs to be user-friendly as well as effective, so their products are stylish and easy to care for. And they're made in their own factory in Montreal, Canada, so you can be sure the materials and workmanship are the absolute best. Ask for ECOGOLD saddle pads, protective boots, and coolers by name at your local tack store or visit them online at ecogold.ca. Now, enjoy today's tip.
Well, HYPP is hyperkalemic periodic paralysis. Very much a mouthful. It's seen in humans and it's seen in horses. And this discovery came about the late 80s, early 90s of that horses had HYPP, and they tried to do genetic testing for it back then and got a genetic marker they could follow. And unfortunately for the wonderful halter horse, impressive stallion halter horse, it got led back to him. And all of his offspring are carrying the HYPP gene, and what the effect is depends on how much of the gene they have. So this goes to the horse tested positive. What positive means, and this answers, Jamie, your questions, is the horse is positive if they are HH and HN. So it'd be kind of nice to know if this horse was HH, which is a homozygous, 100% HYPP, or an HN, which is 50% HYPP. An HH can have some severe repercussions, but they are manageable, and the HN may or may not show signs. So those are 2 important things to keep in mind. And then, of course, the other letters you'll see is NN, meaning they don't have the gene at all.
NN, that's when they say NN, so he's safe. That means he doesn't have it at all. It's not even in his bloodstream.
NN is what you want. You don't want the H's, especially the double H's.
H's are bad. I gotcha. So go ahead, Christy. You lead to, because I want to know what the clinical signs are of this. Well, how do you know your horse is having an HYPP attack?
They can range. The most severe is they're down, they're trembling, and they can die. Their diaphragm freezes up. And I guess we should go back to what actually is going on. It gets into the physiology of horse muscle and bloodstream. There are things called sodium channels in the muscle and potassium channels in the muscle, and they get basically out of whack is the best way to describe it, and there's too much potassium. And circulating bloodstream, not enough balance between the sodium and potassium, because they have different positive and negative ions that balance each other. So then the muscles start to tremble because they're out of whack, and they can paralyze, which is the periodic paralysis part of the HYPP definition. So these horses that are down and out and trembling and then have their diaphragm basically freezes up, they quit breathing. That's your most severe. Horses going into anesthesia, you need to know, are they HH or HN? It really will help the anesthesiologist. A simple castration in the field could go wrong. in these horses. So it's really important to know if these horses have this issue, just to kind of cover everybody and do the safest thing for the horse. The mildest case would be just a simple muscle trembling when they're under stress. You put them into training at 2, 3, 4 years of age, and you start to see that they have muscle trembling. You've got to keep in mind, make sure you're dealing with HYPP and not another muscle disease, too. So it's very important to get the vet involved at this time when you're seeing this issue. Make sure that the horse is not having RER or PSSM, a lot of other leathers out there for muscle diseases. Back to HYPP, they can also have an odd breathing strider sound or whinnying sound. It sounds very hoarse, pardon the expression, the pun, but they have a really dry, raspy sound when they either breathe when they're being worked or when they're trying to whinny. That is paralyzation of the laryngeal muscles that causes that odd sound. They can sometimes flicker the third eyelid. So if you see something on a baby, you're walking the baby out and it flickers its third eyelid because you just weaned it, start looking into checking for HYPP. Just something as simple as that might tick you off to look into it. So, I had a horse that showed up at a farm. They were on trial. They put it on a wash rack. They're going to wash it down. So now it's in a strange environment. Put it on a wash rack with a bunch of strange horses, and it sat like a dog. And that one, I told them, sounds like HYPP to me. They didn't want to go ahead and test. They just turned the horse back around and said, no, thank you. So that's what you're looking for, is these very mild to, unfortunately, very major. And it's always, not always, it seems to be induced by stress. Trailer ride, weaning, starting training, new barn, anything that you think would be out of the norm for the horse can trigger this episode.
Very good. And Jamie mentioned earlier that it affects quarter horses, but I also wanted to point out that quarter horses get crossed with a lot of things these days. Oh. And so it's not just a purebred quarter horse that may be affected. It could be a paint, a palom, anything that's been crossed with an affected quarter horse back in its bloodlines.
I have to say this, and I might have some some quarter horse people would be mad about it, but it was just kind of a funny joke that when I started to work, I was in Texas at a practice, and that's basically when HYPP was coming out, and they actually nailed it down to where the genetic markers came from and what to look for. And I was running anesthesia for the surgeon, and he and I kind of made a casual joke one time, maybe we should test these horses before we put them under anesthesia. But these were racing quarter horses. And we looked at each other and said, nah, impressive breeds can't race. Because they just look So, of course, they are in the racing quarter horses because there has been some cross down the line, and you still need to test them for it. But that was just not to be mean to the racing quarter horses. They do race well, and not to be mean to the halter quarter horses. They do have their function in life of looks and functionality. So,
well, and just to clarify that a little bit, for those who didn't get that joke, because I laughed because that's pretty funny, the impressive line that began this, that kind of founded this disease, HYPP, is a halter breed. We are talking the big, ginormous, thick-bodied, big-headed, just giant quarter horses that have those little teeny teacup feet. So that's why it's funny that they don't race, because they would not get very far on those feet if they were to race. So that's why that's pretty funny. And you would not probably see a lot of them. But, yeah, now that it's been thinned out, because didn't Impressive, wasn't it that in the 80s?
Yeah, he hit his height in the 80s. And, being a girl from Missouri, that's where he came from. I followed and knew all about Impressive. And so it was, disheartening for that owner and the original breeder of him to have this come back on them. And quite a few of the halter people, they liked that, and so did the judges, and they liked the big fat muscling and the little tiny feet, which is abnormal. That's not quite a normal functional horse, but that's what humans have created over the years in our ignorance.
Yeah, and I wanted to point out too. I was, and thanks Jamie for bringing in all that about the halter bloodline, the halter type because that's exactly where I was going. And I wanted to mention a story that some of you may be familiar with that we covered a couple of years ago. There was a paraplegic foal in North Carolina that was treated pretty successfully at NC State and did pretty well, but he had C-trace back to impressive. So keep in mind this foal was paraplegic. He had an abscess next to his spinal cord at a few weeks of age that really messed him up. But so paraplegic, unable to use his back end properly, and that horse still had the butt of a well-trained halter horse. Conditioned halter horse. I mean, he couldn't use those muscles the way he was supposed to. That horse's butt was huge. So that muscling often goes along with the HYPP gene. Not always, of course.
Not always, right.
But
That's
if
genetic.
you've got a horse
That's
that
genetic.
Absolutely.
Can I ask a question here? Aubrey,
Sure.
one of our listeners, posted on Facebook, does anyone know the HYPP status of the horse? Of the girl that passed out going into the ring in Kentucky a couple months ago. I think you guys covered it over at the horse. Her name was Christina Tull, and she was going into the ring. The horse collapsed and fell on top of her, and she kind of had a miraculous recovery. I didn't realize that was an HYPP thing. Is that something you remember at all?
It's not something I remember off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
Okay. It sounds like it.
Reporting on it.
Yeah, I don't know if it was or not. Maybe Aubrey knows something that we don't there. All right, sorry. 2 in a row.
Sorry, no worries. Sorry, I can't
That's all
answer
right.
that for you.
And I want to follow up with Christy's comment that this has disseminated out to many breeds because there's a lot of crossing of quarter horses, and it's, as you stated, Jamie, it's been since the 80s this horse has been around. So there's over, I think, what they state, 550,000 babies out of the impressive line at one point they counted. So, I mean, there's many babies out there and many horses out there that could possibly have this. There was no requirement to test for it by the American Quarter Horse Association until about 2000, 2001, where they required for registration to test and then stamp it, HH, HN, and N on the registry. So now there is a stamp that goes on the registry. So if you have a horse previous to the new millennium, you may want to consider testing if you have any issues with that horse because they weren't required to test. Now there's other horse clubs that still don't require the testing either. So it's still out there, and you can't just assume, since there's no stamp on your registration papers, that the horse is going to be fine. In 2007, AQHA, the American Quarter Horse Association, chose not to register HH foals anymore. So if you have a positive HH foal, you cannot register it with the American Quarter Horse Association. As of 2008, the Appaloosa Horse Club will not register an HH foal.
Good for them, because that's a great, trying to thin out, because what really bothered me is they just accepted it. And this is not, I've seen a horse that was down and having the muscle tremors, and you just feel so darn bad for the things, and it's a genetic thing, and they keep breeding it. So good for them for not registering those horses and trying to nip this in the bud, because it is just horrible to watch.
It is.
Absolutely.
It really is. The one other one is the Palomino Horse Registry won't take either. Won't register a NH or an HH. And the AQHA is in the consideration of not doing the NH. I don't think they've made a final ruling on it yet. So people are at least stepping up to the plate and saying, we're not going to have this anymore, and we need to eradicate it.
Is it something that dilutes over a period of time from generation to generation or not?
No, it's just a chance of breeding. If you have an NH and an NH and they breed together, you have a good chance of still getting an HH.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not something that will breed slowly out over time. It's either they have half a copy of it, or they have both copies of it, or they don't have any. So
it's kind of like breeding a Palomino to a bay horse. You have a good chance of getting a buckskin, but you still have the chance that it won't be. Kind of genetic idea.
And I wanted to update us a little bit on those numbers that Erin mentioned. I apologize for not being able to find a more recent article off in a hurry, but we had an article in our magazine on October 2001 reporting on a presentation at a veterinary convention. And at that time, one of the researchers, Sharon Spear, had mentioned that about 100,000 horses at that time, 10 years ago, were carrying impressive in their pedigrees. Now, that doesn't mean all of those horses have the HYPP gene, but that's the impact of that stallion. and how widespread his genes are in the population because his offspring were so successful in many cases.
And kudos to Dr. Spear. I was lucky enough to meet her after she finished the research. She is the one that found impressive to be the carrier and the start of this whole problem, and she received death threats. So she kind of wished she never went down this road at one point because it got kind of stressful for her lifestyle.
Oh, I bet.
I didn't know that part. Well, we're running a little bit late on time. Erin, can you tell us briefly some of the tips for managing the disease?
Yeah,
if you happen to have an affected
alfalfa.
horse.
Yeah, no alfalfa, which a lot of these halter horses like to be fed alfalfa to kind of beef them up and look good. So they get off alfalfa. They can do beef pulp, but horses can't live on beef pulp alone. Grass hay are fantastic, and oats. But something with a low potassium diet, there are diets out there made. So you just need to look for them. Reduce the stress. Now, if you're going to show this horse, you're going to have stress. You're going to probably want to up their diet a little bit. So you're going to have to probably put them on medication. And the medication out there is acetazolamide. And I've had babies that have that nasty respiratory sound. It's like a respiratory stridor sound that when you put them on acetazolamide, it goes away. And as soon as you take the acetazolamide off for a day, it comes back. So they just for a lifetime, have to live on that. And it cuts down on seeing the down and out and the trembling. So if you have an episode and you're waiting for your veterinarian to come out and run some fluids and such for your horse, you can give your horse about 60 cc's of Cara syrup and take them for a walk. If they're down and out on the ground, you got to do the best you can. Listen to your veterinarian that can probably give you some guidance on what to do until they get there.
That's what I was about to ask you, because one of the vet clinics I worked at, the guy would always bring with him Caro syrup and just, if they go down, just give them some of this and walk them around, So I was going to ask you, is that for real? Because I thought he was crazy.
No, it helps with the channels and getting things moving, but it's not. It's just an immediate fix, kind of help them get through an episode. If they were out of acetazolamide or the barn help forgot to give it, they could go rummage up the acetazolamide in the meantime and then give a squirt of disease. I had a broodmare, and I went to a farm for full watch, and it had an episode. And they were calling the owner saying, you need to bring us acetazolamide, because they forgot to leave the med. How retarded is that? That's stressful enough being a broodmare. And I said, in the meantime, Caro syrup and walk it until he brings it back. And that's what happened. And then they got the drug back, on board that night, and she was fine all the way until she foaled. She was good to go.
I knew Cara syrup was good for something.
It's good for a lot of things. It's really good for a lot of things.
Horses with HYPP and pecan pie. There you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. I would much rather use it for one thing than the other. Fair enough.
Now, is there a place where there's more information on the horse that we can post a link to?
Absolutely, and I was just about to put it on your Facebook page. We have a number of articles about HYPP because we were covering it back from when before we knew what it was and what to call it. So I'm adding that link to your page right now.
All right. Well, this is a good conversation, very interesting, and I'm sure a lot of people didn't know much about it. I didn't know much about it, so we're learning something every Wednesday here.
Well, there you go. To listen to more of the Horse.com's tips, just go to horsetipdaily.com and go to the Experts drop-down menu on the left. If you love listening to Glenn the Geek and Jamie putting in their 2 cents on horse health topics, tune into Horses in the Morning on Wednesdays at 10 to get your weekly fix of up-to-the-minute horse health information. You can also go to thehorse.com and find the mother lode of horse health information covering pretty much every topic imaginable. Please stop by the Horse Tip Daily Facebook page and let us know what you think of the tips you hear on the show. It's also a great place to tell us about topics you'd like to hear us cover. You can subscribe to all of the great shows on the Horse Radio Network through iTunes or Zune and get your horse podcasts automatically downloaded to your iPod, Zune, or MP3 player. I'll be back again tomorrow with another new expert and a different horse tip. Until then, go ride your horse! The Horse Radio Network and the Horse Radio Network hosts are not responsible for statements of guests or their opinions. Use your own judgment when listening to the tips provided by the experts on Horse Tip Daily.